there are plenty of spouses and family members in our program that are reaping the benefits of the veteran's healing journey, and they'll never do a psychedelic. I don't do psychedelics. I don't feel like it's a one size fits all, or that we should be preaching that. I think that to each his own. If there's a very powerful tool that needs to be utilized, psychedelics are that, but there are also other tools. And I think that when you look the same, act the same, talk the same, speak common sense, use facts, you're driven with facts instead of feelings, that's where everyone can come together. And I think that's why VETS has been as successful as we have been in such a short period of time.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Psychedelic Conversations. Today we have Amber Capone from VETS in the house. Thank you so much for being with us. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Susan, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
Likewise. So I just want to say a few sentences from your bio for our listeners to get to know you a little bit more, and then we'll dive into your story and what brings you to this work, if that's okay. So you are the founding co-founder and a chief executive officer. You have a history of fixing, building, and tenaciously seeking solutions to complex challenges. In 2019, you walked away from a successful career producing a real estate agent in order to pursue your critical work, yet serving as a co-founder and a chief executive officer of VETS. We'll add your bio, the full bio, in the show notes for our listeners, and then the links. They're very used to our format, and they'll connect and find a bit more about what you guys are doing. So for now, please tell us about your background. What brings you to this work?
Oh my gosh. Well, how much time do we have? I'll try to keep it brief. I met my husband when I was very young. We've been together for almost 27 years, and never in a million years did I think that I would ever be his wife, or married to someone in the military, or supporting that military member through multiple combat deployments. I certainly never saw the challenges that would come with transition back to civilian life. And I certainly never thought that I would be running an organization focused on psychedelic therapies and, helping people through charity. But it has been the greatest honor and the greatest work. I certainly am living out my life's purpose today. And I see now, looking back over the last 20 plus years, well, honestly, looking back over my whole life, how I've been uniquely positioned to do just this. So the story really is rooted in love, a love story between my husband and myself, and meeting him and coming to love him wildly before there were ever any challenges before us that, involved war, military service, combat deployments, and then this transition. We have found ourselves in situations over the last 2 decades where, would have been a whole lot easier to part ways. But because I'm tenacious and moderately, massively stubborn, I chose to stick it out. And I'm so thankful that I did. I never thought that there would be tools like psychedelics to provide this much healing and growth, and to, take us from our darkest place into the place that we are now. Not only have we found solid footing again through the power of psychedelic therapies, but we have helped open up avenues of healing for other veterans and families to find the same healing. So I think it's all suffice to say, we can plan and hope and dream, but sometimes life has a much, much different set of plans and circumstances that we have to adapt to. And walking into full purpose and presence and surrendering in a way that Marcus and I have both had to do has been it's been it's been wild and it's been amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I was looking at some of your videos, just wanted to connect and understand a little bit more in details your background. And there's, for our listeners especially, they can just, search your name, and there's lots of stories that you shared that were really heartwarming and also very powerful, but also I can just feel the intensity and what it takes to really pull someone out from that level of darkness and the challenges. So I really appreciate the work. I was speaking to a trauma-informed therapist. You probably know her. She's very well known in the space. And there was a moment we were talking about discussing how, there's a lot of talks about veterans and needing to help and support them. But she said nobody talks about their partners. Nobody talks about their spouses and what they have to go through, and the challenges that they have to go through. It's really amazing that you can be there. So I really want to appreciate you and acknowledge what it might take to support this journey of so I really want to say that. So tell us a bit more about your organization for our listeners so they can get to know a bit more. So how, what are the pillars? What are the, funding? It's how can they be, if listeners are interested, how can they be part of it, support it, or even reach out to receive some help? How does that work?
Sure. Yeah, well, thank you, first of all, for the acknowledgement. I think that you're absolutely right. Spouses are oftentimes overlooked for a number of reasons. I mean, they're serving back at home. I think that whether it's holding down the fort while the military member is on the battlefield or training for the battlefield, or being the rock and the anchor for the family during turbulent times, whether in service or transitioning out of service, or just being overlooked or seemingly forgotten, because there are all of these organizations that exist to serve the veteran who has served the country, but really the whole family is serving the country. So the acknowledgement is much appreciated, and VETS has a significant focus on spouses, partners, families. We've got to take care of them because it can be very destabilizing for the veteran if family life or spouse is not feeling that level of support. Our story is really the impetus for the organization because the transition from military service was so difficult, and we were pursuing things that were available to us through first military medicine and then the VA, the Veterans Administration in the United States, which is set up to provide lifelong health care to anyone who has served. They mean well, but their two primary tools are talk therapy and pharmaceuticals, neither of which are entirely effective, or in some cases at all effective, for a large number of the veterans who are pursuing them. My husband was one of them, and I think for anyone who has tried several treatments unsuccessfully and deemed more or less treatment resistant, that everything that you try unsuccessfully like knocks you down a rung on the ladder. And so you're already struggling, you're really trying to find the willpower to keep going, and nothing's working. I think that, that's when thoughts of suicide can become very pervasive. Like, this is never going to go away. It's never going to get better. I'm the problem. My family would be better off without me, etc. And over time, that voice, I could tell in Marcus's mind, was becoming louder and louder and louder. And so I just thought we have to have an unconventional approach. I didn't know anything about psychedelics. I didn't know that ibogaine was a psychedelic. I knew that one friend that we trusted had shared, he and his wife had shared with me that he had really been struggling, and they thought that the treatment that he did and found great success with would be helpful for Marcus. And so at that point, I just thought, I will try anything. We're running out of time, running out of hope. I knew that as a mother, I would, inevitably have to choose to keep my children in this situation or to leave and start over, which really would have been the easier thing to do in many ways. I chose to trust this friend and more or less, give Marcus an ultimatum. I had approached him about this about a year prior, and he was very uncomfortable with the idea of, it was just so obscure. It was like, what? Ibogaine, what? And treatment in Mexico? No, like we live in the most medically advanced country on the planet. We've got plenty of options here. Finally, as we were running out of hope, he decided to give it a try. And he literally said to me, like, basically verbatim, don't expect this to do anything. Don't expect me to like come home a different person. And it was wild how successful it was in such a short amount of time. It was almost like, wait, what just happened? We didn't really even know what we were walking into. And like, it was provided this intense relief in such a short amount of time. And the very first thing that he said to me was, this is exactly what his friends and teammates needed. We knew that there was, struggling going on all over our community, but the community standards are such that you don't talk about that. And so he was thinking that if we could just raise funds to help his friends, that we could see like what's here. There was one before him, and then he experienced it. And then, what if this would work for more people who were suffering in silence? What if this was a potential solution for so much suffering that we knew existed? But we still weren't courageous enough to talk about it. And I wanted a year to go by, and I wanted 12 other individuals to have the same experience before we would really get serious about talking about it. And because it's so stigmatized, everything is about it. Saying you were struggling, getting help, saying you got help, saying the help was psychedelics. By that time, I had done some due diligence on ibogaine and psychedelics in general, and it was like potentially the next great frontier of medicine. Yet we knew nothing about it, and it was illegal in the US. So it just seemed like this is very risky. We were raising money, we were helping friends, the friends were having the same outcomes, things were looking really great, but I wanted that 1 year mark to hit. I didn't want to think like, I didn't want it to not last, like, oh, it's too good to be true. It felt like that was very possible. We knew that it was working for almost everyone, but we didn't know how long it would last. And unfortunately, at the 11.5 month mark of that 12-month window that I had wanted to pass, one of my closest friends' husbands took his life. He was a former teammate of Marcus's, and his suicide really propelled us very quickly out of our comfort zone, because I knew that it did seem to be working, and this could be the answer, or an answer. And we were also up against time, because suicide had really not been pervasive at that point within our community, but there had been a few. And I thought this could be the next wave to hit this community, and we are not prepared for that. So the idea of VETS was born, that someone had provided this funding for Marcus. And at our lowest point, we didn't have to worry about travel, transport, costs associated, paying for it, preparing for it, integrating from it. It was just like, do this. And so we wanted to give that opportunity to other families.
This is just so profound. I mean, I'm fully aware of the space and the other organizations that are doing very similar work, but I mean, you seem like you had experienced it, you're in it, and it's coming from a very different place. It's coming from a lived experience, and also the appreciation of what it means for someone to go through such healing process so that they can be back into their lives. So again, I watched some of your videos together with Marcus, and it was really touching. And I love the groundedness that you have in your voices, because you also are aware that at the moment, psychedelic renaissance is in full swing, despite the legal landscape, US being the leading in terms of decriminalization, and there's lots of, movements are happening, and then this trickling into UK where we are, and then Europe, so on. But what I found is that in this noise and a bit of chaos at the moment, everyone's trying to sort of bring different sides, approaches, the clinical approach is the best, or the churches should be coming in back into our lives, or like a sacrament, or the indigenous. There's so much noise out there. And I believe having a clear path and a lived experience, that knowing what you need feels like the way forward. And this is what I heard from when you both spoke, and that groundedness, where I was actually laughing when Marcus was saying, like, look, this is not panacea. This is not going to be like an overnight thing, but still it can work. So that's the kind of message that I think we need to give out more now. I feel like, so that it's tangible. It's not over promising, but then it's also true, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, we come from a community of unconventional thinkers. Marcus was a Navy SEAL, and so, he was engaged in unconventional warfare for the better part of his adult life very effectively. And I think that, when you pair that mindset with a very capable team, and I consider all veterans to be a very capable team, that have a way of, fostering instant credibility when they speak on something, and a very purple place. So politically in the United States, you've got the right, which the color for the right is red, and you've got the left, the color for the left is blue. And so blending those together, making purple, that is what we've seen in the political landscape. I think when you speak with common sense and you create solutions that are not too far-fetched, that everyone can gather around, and we take it in incremental steps and build one step on the other with this very capable team fighting unconventional warfare up against the impossible, it's the best chance for success in my mind. I think that what we're seeing here politically is that the decriminalization, legalization, commercialization, churches, it's just not viable for both sides of the political aisle. What is viable right now is research and a scaled back approach at, determining where to go next by being driven by science and facts and credible advocates who are reporting broadly that psychedelic therapies have been far more efficacious, life transforming, and in some cases life saving. And that ripples out. There are plenty of spouses and family members in our program that are reaping the benefits of the veteran's healing journey, and they'll never do a psychedelic. I don't do psychedelics. I don't feel like it's a one size fits all, or that we should be preaching that. I think that to each his own. If there's a very powerful tool that needs to be utilized, psychedelics are that, but there are also other tools. And I think that when you look the same, act the same, talk the same, speak common sense, use facts, you're driven with facts instead of feelings, that's where everyone can come together. And I think that's why VETS has been as successful as we have been in such a short period of time.
I love that. I read a tagline not long ago. It says "Science kills stigma." I thought that was really, really great.
Yeah.
Definitely. So tell us more on the practical side. Let's say if someone's listening, or friends of friends who knows another, vet suffering through PTSD or TBI. Could you talk to us a little bit about what does it look like on a practical side? How can they reach out? What's the procedure? How do they apply? Who's accepted? What are those kind of protocols that you have in place?
2024 will be the year at VETS in which we figure out how we can really scale this thing to help more people, because the word has spread. And I think that anytime you pair something that's so efficacious with a community that is so trusting, and a need that is so great, it just creates need that cannot possibly be met. The only way in which this will come to full scale is through legislative change. That starts with research. And so right now, VETS is focused on expanding our programs and our aperture to take more veterans into our program. But as you know, there are bottlenecks across the industry, whether it's protocolization or integration, preparation, trained therapists, training programs, access to dosing, sustainable sourcing. There are issues across the board. And so I think, as we look at scalability, um, okay, it's a lot for an organization like us to go from, we were at like 230-ish veterans last year that we were able to provide full subsidies to travel outside of the United States. We don't do dosing, no facilitation of any kind. VETS exists to provide the subsidy for veterans to leave this country, access psychedelics abroad in a legal or unregulated setting. And then once they're back, we provide all of the prep, or I'm sorry, we provide prep services too, but all the integration services following the experience. And that goes on for life. So when someone's in our program, they're in it. There's no end date. They get one-on-one coaching. There is an end date on the one-on-one, but from one-on-one, they go into group integration, peer support. We have an ambassador program, a community platform, ongoing workshops. 6 days a week, we have something events. We offer spouse support. And to go from 230 to 330 is like significantly more work. Fundraising work, back-end support work. We need more staff. We need more peer supporters, coaches, etc. And it's 100 more people. It's far more effective for us to move the needle legislatively through state and federal policy initiatives than it is to try to figure out a way to help 100 more individuals when we turn away hundreds. It's awful. Choosing the applicants is the worst. It's like in some ways the best because you get to tell someone they've been accepted, but we can accept right now about 1 or 0.5 of every 10 applications we receive. So
Oh,
it's
wow, it's really sad. It's heartbreaking. Yeah.
it's terrible.
Yeah. And those that are accepted are with, is there a specific, is it, what are you looking at? Is it PTSD? Is it, you talk about TBI?
Yeah.
What are the symptoms has to be at what level?
First and foremost, we are not set up to be a crisis management organization in any capacity. So if someone's really, really struggling, they're in inpatient care, they're in a detox facility, they're probably not ready for the VETS program right now. So we are looking for individuals who know what they're getting into and to what degree possible, because they've taken our e-course online, they've done their due diligence, they've talked to friends, a lot of referrals back to the program. For every one person that receives funding from VETS, we typically get 3 to 5 referrals of their friends who are needing support. So most everyone has known someone who's been through the program. Not everyone, but we're looking at a number of things in terms of applications. We're looking at number of years served, number of combat deployments, quality of life assessment, written appeal, why someone is interested in this opportunity, how much due diligence they've done, whether their spouse is supportive, how committed they are to the process, to working with a coach, to making lifestyle shifts, to showing up for group integration, for staying part of the VETS platform and community. And when all of those things align and you have someone who has done the due diligence, who really is suffering but is not in crisis, whose spouse is on board, who is committed to making the change, those are the people that we are really excited to fund, because it creates such a our community is so invigorated and competitive by nature that it fosters this sense of optimism and excitement to get better. And so you see them communicating with each other. I'll see Marcus doing it still with his friends, oh, so and so started doing Kundalini yoga, so I'm going to try it, or I'm going to try like the step higher. And it almost becomes like a healing competition, if you will, which is
Yeah.
really, really interesting.
Yeah, I can just imagine.
Mhm.
Would you say that if, let's say, because, coming from a trauma-informed therapy myself, we always believe in community and the environment and the family that needs to be behind the person who's going through this processes. So what are your thoughts? I mean, imagine, I can imagine that they have their spouses there and desperately needing their shift and healing processes to take place. But let's say if they don't have that kind of support at home, do you see or do you encounter any of those type of veterans as well? And what does that look like?
Absolutely. Um, there have been several grant recipients who've come through our program who've lost everything and have decided to do this for themselves and to, try to piece back together what's possible um, from their relationships that have fallen apart. Sometimes that means reconciliation, sometimes that means separation, um, and sometimes that just means salvaging what you can and learning to come to terms with it. But more often than not, I have seen spouses actually become destabilized. I think it could be very destabilizing for a spouse either way. I think that supporting the spouses is so critical because it can be so destabilizing for someone who, in many cases, like it has become safe to break for the first time. There's finally relief. There's this accountability or this um, acceptance on the part of the veteran to take back their life and really, start to live again. And the spouse sometimes can be intimidated by that, or it can spark insecurity. It can spark resentment, and it can spark so much relief that the spouse then falls apart. I experienced my own form of this, and it took weeks to work through it. So that's why spouses are a huge priority at VETS.
Wow, you just answered something that I was just I was going to ask you, and I was going to really ask about what are the challenges that people are experiencing as a couple going through this experience. And you just kind of given us a picture of what it could be like. Um, do you, most spouses, are they open to psychedelic experiences, or usually they just kind of stand on the sidelines and just be there, support and experience the spouse's process rather than themselves? Or do you get people really being intrigued and maybe wanting to try that as well?
I would say more and more are becoming intrigued and at least keeping it as an option for their own healing journey, even if it's not done in conjunction with or close to the veterans healing journey. It's not uncommon for 6 months down the road, a year down the road, the spouse to come to the realization that they're ready for this um, intervention themselves. I never portray that this is a one size fits all or this is the answer, but we definitely encourage all spouses to be on their own healing journeys, whether it's with or without the use of psychedelics as a tool, um, which is why we offer multiple calls. We have a director of women's programs who is our spouse supporter. We have spouse peer supporters, like, veteran spouses in the program. Who can hold space for others who are new, and this whole thing is very unusual or uncomfortable for some. And we have groups that meet and they're very raw. We have spouse support groups, supporting the supporters, and then we have avenues for spouses who are in the middle of conflict or experiencing a real rough patch. So we try to prepare as much as we can. We try to absorb on the other side. And then if a spouse decides that they would like to pursue um, a psychedelic healing retreat of their own, we do help subsidize that as well.
Wow. Yeah. It's like covered in all fronts, seems like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bye.
And what are the psychedelic medicines or substances that are seeked out? Is it ibogaine or iboga, or is there like other, like ayahuasca, or what are the medicines chosen or at least seeked out for this treatment?
I would say the overwhelming majority of our grant recipients are choosing to pursue the same protocol that Marcus did back in 2017, which is ibogaine followed by 5-MeO DMT. And second to that, psilocybin. A lot of the spouses are choosing psilocybin, ayahuasca. Some are much more comfortable staying in the United States and pursuing ketamine therapy. Soon we'll be able to provide funding for MDMA assisted therapy. Um, and then, some have chosen to do full plant iboga. So we have 6 different modalities that fall within our funding umbrella. So ibogaine or iboga, 5-MeO DMT, ketamine, psilocybin, MDMA, and ayahuasca.
Yeah, that's a really great variety. So, from your perspective or from your experience, which ones are the most effective, would you say, or does it depend on the person? Because usually the container is the first container, right? The person.
Uh, yeah, the VETS course is really designed to help someone decide what treatment or therapy is right for them. VETS is not set up to prescribe, diagnose, treat, any sort of facilitation recommendations. But the e-course helps someone break it down. It could be as simple as I don't want to be out of the United States, or I prefer to dip my toe in the water. I don't want a 5-hour experience. I want a 15-hour experience. And so that sort of helps categorize which psychedelics might be better suited for someone's preferences. But most of the grant recipients in our program are choosing to do the ibogaine 5-MeO DMT protocol. And I would say that's the one that we believe in the most or have the most excitement or experience with. The observations following an ibogaine experience from our own personal journey back in 2017 when Marcus did it for the first time, and then hundreds of others in our program, has been that ibogaine provides a very unique way of addressing traumatic brain injury. And I personally am of the mindset that anyone who has seen combat is more or less rubber stamped as having PTSD. The special operations community, which is our community and the primary recipients of grants funding from VETS, they just are a little bit different in how they're wired. And so the PTSD diagnosis for Marcus never fully resonated with me, but I was seeing neurocognitive decline, which was quite terrifying given his history of playing football for 15 years and working with explosives for 13 years. Really became worrisome when I started to research what the cumulative effects are of concussive and subconcussive blows to the head as well as blasts. And a lot of veterans in our program are dealing with a long history of traumatic brain injury to some degree. Ibogaine is very unique in its capability to create. I hesitate to use the word healing because more science is certainly needed, but it seems to be very effectively addressing some of the fallout of traumatic brain injury. And this was recently studied by Stanford University in collaboration with VETS. We provided 30 VETS grant recipients for an observational study pre and post ibogaine, which included fMRI imaging. And I think that the potential for the treatment of traumatic brain injury, as well as some of the psychological issues that many veterans are facing, makes it the most uniquely qualified or uniquely promising at sort of checking every single box. And I think there are 4 key categories of suffering that our family was experiencing prior to Marcus's ibogaine journey. A lot of veteran families or veterans are experiencing these same areas. There was a lot of psychological trauma purging that happened from Marcus's ibogaine experience, going all the way back to his childhood. There were certainly war things, mostly childhood things, that were sort of trapped in his psyche. He was able to effectively address those and have a perspective shift at dealing with those psychological traumas. Um, Ibogaine is also very anti-addictive, and so he was using alcohol as a coping mechanism prior to his Ibogaine experience, and it was very unhealthy. Um, he emerged from that experience with no desire to drink. It actually repulsed him. There was also a neurocognitive benefit. He was very he had shifted so much in his mood and personality, but also in his executive functioning and his cognition that it was terrifying. Following his ibogaine, he was like firing on all cylinders. He was cognitively just back. So that was really helpful. And then there was a spiritual reconnection that science will probably struggle to fully explain. He felt connected again to his true self, to me as his wife, to nature, to his kids, to life, to purpose, to God. These are things that, he had really felt dead on the inside prior to ibogaine. So when you give someone relief in one of those four categories, it can be a complete game changer. But to receive relief in all four categories was unprecedented. And that's why I personally feel that ibogaine has the capability to check every box to some degree in terms of veteran suffering.
Yeah. Wow, this is very helpful. Thanks for sharing. I actually speak to quite a few different facilitators, some of the retreats in Costa Rica, and there's actually a good friend. He wrote a book on iboga, and I remember he was sharing his experience as he saw these little nanotechnological, tiny little, it looked like AI that came in and sort of rewired his brain. He actually saw that in real time as a visual or visions or hallucinations. So I thought that was really interesting. And
Commonly described, actually. Yeah, a rewiring of
yeah.
the brain, rebooting of the brain. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people speak like that when they experience book. What about 5-MeO? What was his experience like? Because a lot of people talk about just white out, not feeling anything, out of body, non-dual experience, and then coming back to realizing, oh my God, my life is precious.
Yeah.
Really connecting. How was his experience with the 5-MeO?
I think ibogaine and 5-MeO are synergistically very effective because ibogaine has this unique ability to create a rewind of someone's life. That's a common theme coming out of the ibogaine experience, is like being right smack dab back in the middle of memories that you vividly um, understand. You've been there before, you've lived through this before, but with a different perspective. So it kind of allows you to revisit past traumas or unresolved issues and close the door on the past. 5-MeO has been described to me as like a rocket ship of to possibility. And so Marcus has done both a handful of times, and it wasn't until several attempts with the 5 that he actually had a breakthrough. And when he finally had a breakthrough, he was able to completely surrender. And in that surrender, he stopped asking why, and wanting all of the answers and trying to piece together in his human mind what his spirit was longing for, which was just freedom. And so when he was able to break free of the shackles of why and understanding and explaining and just living, being, accepting, surrendering, he found this unimaginable peace. And like every answer had been given to him in just this like simplistic knowing without knowing. But I can't really describe it, especially because it was his experience, not mine. This is my interpretation of it. But it's been described that way to me a number of times. The
Yeah.
surrender and the just being taken into the realm of possibility instead of trying to control and manipulate and figure it out and make sense of it with our human mind has been the release and the relief that many have been longing for.
Sounds like he found his liberation through that
Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say, again, from veterans' perspective, do they need to go back and visit these experiences? Because we all know that it's not like a one-time magic that, they are done. So this Marcus or any of the, participants of this, processes, do they come back annually, 6 months, 3 months? How does that work? Or is there a protocol that you advise or provide?
I wouldn't say there's a protocol that we advise or provide, but I would say that it's very individualistic. And so what works for Marcus may not work for anyone else. It's something that I think he has he feels like he needs an annual reboot. He's done ibogaine once a year every year since his initial experience, and it's not necessarily because he's needed it. Now there have been years that have been worse than others, but when I look back at our life prior to his first experience in 2017, and I look at our life today, it's absolutely unrecognizable. It's a completely different life that we're living. And it's because he's been committed to the daily practices with an annual reboot. This is the first year that he said, like, I don't think I need to go back. I think I'm good. But he's worked through a lot of traumas, and he's learned that this is not something that someone or something or some plant can do for you. It's the willingness to continually put in the work. For someone like my husband and his teammates, it's a completely different concept. That surrender is a totally different concept. That, no finish line, totally different concept. He's used to, I want a goal, I'm setting a goal, I'm checking the box, I'm moving to the next goal. And there is no end, like, finish line here. It's continual for the rest of his life. And I think that he's come to understand and appreciate that. So it's more like, yeah, maybe he'll do ibogaine again in his life. Maybe someone needs to do it twice a year. Maybe someone needs to do it once in their lifetime. Maybe someone needs to go back annually. But what's more important is the willingness to get up every single day and do that work. Because ibogaine is not going to do it. It's going to give you the tools, but it's not going to keep you where you need to be.
Yeah, I just love this. Honestly, this is the approach that I really advocate as well. Um, Also, I think we should not have the stigma of or feel sort of shy of saying there's nothing wrong with building relationship with these medicines or
Yeah.
substances. There's nothing wrong with incorporating it into our lives. Look at the wisdom traditions or the esoteric or the indigenous traditions. They lived side by side. It was with them in their festivals, the dying and the birth and this celebration or grieving, whatever it is, they incorporate it into their lives. So I feel like I think we carry this Western competitive mind of like seeking that one thing, magic bullet, and then doing it one time and that's it. It's almost like a connotation of failed or failure around that. So I'm glad you said that because everyone's different and they may have to revisit monthly or sometimes until they feel comfortable and then
Yeah.
continue on in that relationship. I think there's nothing wrong with that.
I totally agree with you. And I also think that everyone is carrying varying levels of trauma. And so, Marcus has gone, I think, 5 times. He's done ibogaine. There's one year, I think, that he didn't do it, but 5 times. And I would say that the beginning, the very first time, he started in the basement of his soul. It was really dark. That's what he was carrying subconsciously, and he didn't even realize it. And so, um, to sort of turn the light on what he was carrying internally was really terrifying for him. And so he described it as being very dark, demonic, difficult. He threw up a lot. The second year he went back, it was fairly dark, fairly demonic, fairly difficult. The third year he went back, it was neutral. The fourth and fifth years, he's described them as blissful. So if you imagine him starting in the basement of his soul, every year he's climbed a flight of stairs. And, at some point he's going to stand on the rooftop and he's going to declare victory. And I think he's almost there. But if he wants to stay on that rooftop, he's got to put in the work. And thank God he's willing to do that because he can keep himself there. Anyone can, but I don't think that there's any shame in needing a reset. We all do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And I love the basement. So we have a concept actually in our community. We call it the basement decluttering. So
Mm.
that you're working through what's been carried, suppressed, generational trauma or your own trauma, whatever that is. And then, I really would like to say openly that the medicine work stops being about trauma all the time at one point. There is a moment that it stops being about trauma and it starts being about more of the connection and building that relationship equally to yourself and the world around you. Um, I think we give too much emphasis on the spiritual, the mystical, and sometimes, people wanting that, conversation with the God. But I think for me, building that relationship to navigate this life is far more valuable. And I think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that's what we need, right?
Honestly, like I think there are other ways to access those types of feelings and conversations and um that level of, perceived path towards enlightenment, if you will. It's accessible with intention. And Marx's intention going into a medicine journey is to grasp what he can of that. But I have the same intention when I sit with intention during quiet time and I really try to tune in, and the all the clutter in the mind creates the static on the station, but the with the more time and intention that you're sitting with, you can get there too. So I would just encourage, I frequently encourage members of our community not to become dependent on the plant or the experience, knowing that like they really hold the key inside of them. The medicine is like a booster. It might get you there faster or more effectively, but like we all have the ability. So yeah.
Yeah. Well said. And with that, we came to the end of our conversation. This has been truly, truly eye-opening and insightful. And thank you so much for
Thank you.
sharing with us. Yeah, before we let you go, tell us your plans for the next 5 years, where you headed with your project, and then if there's anything that's burning that you want to share with us before we let you go.
This year will be a year of scale for vets, just trying to figure ways in which we can impact more people and create more awareness, more policy change within the United States, expand globally. I had a call recently with a group from the UK. There are other countries reaching out about their veterans and how we can help them start programs. Furthering the research is always top priority. But beyond that, Marcus is working on a separate project called Tara Mind, which is how to scale for the non-veteran citizens of the United States and potentially beyond, uh, by providing access and affordability, equity to these medicines once they are available, and cleared through the FDA. So, MDMA is coming, psilocybin's coming, who knows what's coming after that. But we wouldn't want these amazing developments to occur without the ability for people to actually access them. So that's what he's working on. I think that together, Marcus and I are going to try to be a little bit more, we're so head down, we're so focused. I'm focused on vets, he's focused on Tara, but there are so many people that have been encouraged through our story or the work of vets or, just the movement overall to embark upon their own healing journeys. And they reach out and they're like, what do you do here? What do you do there? How do I navigate this situation? Da, da, da. We're going to try to be a little bit more out there with what has worked for us and what are some of the core tenements to turning our lives around in the way that we have. Um, Beyond that, I think we're just going to try to enjoy life because we have been in a grind since, oh gosh, for 20 plus years. We celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary next year. And I really hope that we can take some downtime and just enjoy being together because it's a miracle we're still together and we're absolutely crazy about each other. So hopefully we can enjoy that a little bit more too.
Sounds amazing. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you for all the work you're both doing. And we hope to have you back maybe in the future to follow up and follow your journey and your new projects with our listeners, if that's okay with you.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. Thank you again. And thank you so much, everybody. Hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. Please tune in and connect with Amber and check out their websites, and the links will be in the show notes. And I will see you on the next one. Bye for now. Thank you so much for joining us. Psychedelic Conversations podcast is designed to educate, inform, and expand awareness. For more information, please head over to psychedelicconversations.com. You can also share with your friends or leave a review so that we can reach more people. You can also join us in our private Facebook group to keep the conversation going. This show is for information purposes only, and it is not intended to provide mental health or medical advice. Thanks for listening.